If I did not have that person, who looked at me and thought, there's potential there, let's give her a chance, I could have been still doing that job. And I know that because I didn't see it in myself. Most people tie their worth to how much they do. So being busy is worn as a badge of honor. It's not a flex, as they say. That has been one of the biggest things for me to unlearn.
A lot of us fall into this trap where we define our whole existence based off what we do.
You dive in and you literally neglect everything else, and that becomes everything that you do. It became my identity. One of the things that I struggled with is, who am I now? Who am I? And it really hit me that it was ego. It was, it's what gets validated by people.
What other things have helped you move through that fear so it doesn't hold you back?
If I were to think of one thing, it's the...
All right, Balancers, today's guest is someone I'm really excited to have on the show. We've been meaning to sit down and have a chat for a few months now. And from the time we sat down to organise this to now, we've actually been able to meet up a few times. So I'm grateful to say I've been able to get to know you a little bit better before we've been able to sit down and have this chat. But very quickly, to introduce her, she is a serial entrepreneur and an angel investor in the fashion, personal development and tech space. From founding The Modest to F-Force, she has built an incredible community of ambitious women who desire to grow, elevate their lives and scale their businesses. She is such a genuine, beautiful soul. I really got that from before I even spoke to you, just seeing you speak on a panel and being able to hear your backstory and your values. I can say they honestly align very closely with mine. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Ghizlan Guenez to The Balance Theory. Welcome to the show, Ghizlan.
Thank you so much for having me and for that gorgeous introduction. Thank you.
You make it very, very easy, honestly.
Thank you, Erika.
I think you have a very interesting background story because you've started in the corporate world and now you've ventured into the entrepreneurial space. And so really you speak to everybody that's listening. So I think before we dive in and I get to ask you about all the interesting things that are top of mind, can you give us a little bit of context to your journey?
Sure. So I'm North African. I'm from Algeria. I left Algiers, where I was born, when I was about 10 and moved to the Middle East with my mother and my stepdad. We lived in Abu Dhabi for a while, then Lebanon, where he is from, for a bit, and then back to Dubai, where I started my first job. And I got into the investment space. I got into the corporate world. I spent 15 years starting from zero to basically growing quite a bit in that one firm. And it was incredible because the growth was insane, and I learned a lot during those 15 years. And then 15 years after, I just felt that it wasn't giving me anything anymore, and that there was no drive, there was no passion. I had everything there. I had an amazing salary at the end of the month, the bonuses, the comfort of being in the same place for so long, and yet just no drive. And there was an idea that was nagging me, so I decided to kind of, start on the entrepreneurship world. That was in 2016. And that was it since then. I never looked back. It's been entrepreneurship, and from fashion to blockchain to personal development, it's been a journey.
So interesting. Let's dive in a little bit to that feeling you had, right? You're in a corporate job, it's comfortable, it's really ticks all the boxes, right? It's really interesting. Sometimes we don't push ourselves to think a little bit more laterally or widely, or how things could change when there's no real reason or impetus behind why we would need to do that. So you had this, would you describe it like a fire in your belly? Was it a curiosity? Was it an interest? What was it that actually, because I think it's one thing to have that and then actually to take action on it. And a lot of people can get stuck between the two. So can you walk us through what you felt and the process of you actually leaving something that was comfortable to really throw yourself in the deep end?
Yeah, I think if you think about it, what I was going through is just a natural feeling of just feeling stagnant. And I think if you are someone who, I think most people want to continuously evolve, right? Some people, do it, some people don't, but everybody wants to experience growth and, moving from where they are into a place that is better. And I think I just felt that I was stagnant. And for me, that's that's my nemesis. I cannot feel like I'm not evolving, and yeah. So there was this idea that I had for a while in my mind. It was a problem that I experienced, and so women around me experience, and so it was right there. It could have been anything else. I think that it was just the right thing for me to kind of move to the next step on the journey. But it's a human need, right? You need certainty, but you also need uncertainty or variety. You need, there are things that you need in your life in order to feel fulfilled.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is you had a strong enough why, right?
Yeah.
Like you had something that you felt connected enough to. And I think that's just something for people listening to reflect on, because I've had ideas in the past that I've not pursued, and when I really think about it, the why wasn't strong enough, the connection wasn't strong enough to what I was doing. So let's talk about the Modest very quickly. What was the business that that kind of kickstarted your entrepreneurial journey? Maybe you can walk us through just that journey and that process. I know it kind of took its own direction. Maybe you can just very briefly walk us through that journey.
So the idea was simple, but it just was not available anywhere. The idea was that I've seen a lot of women around me who dress modestly and love fashion. I myself, having been in the financial space for 15 years, dressed in a conservative way, but I loved fashion. So it was always difficult or challenging to shop. And so I decided to create a destination, a shopping platform for women to find modesty, but also fashion. And it's more, so it really solved a need, an actual problem, but it was done in a way that was very different and in a way that broke a lot of stereotypes. And that's why it really grew and it became very, very popular. Because a lot of people, when they think about modesty, they think of a particular look, a particular woman, a particular outfit, even color. But the reality is that a large constitution or a large constituency of these women are women who love fashion just as much as we do, but want modesty. And that's exactly what we did. And because it was very agnostic in terms of religion or background, it brought together women who loved modesty, but also who didn't and just loved the style and the fashion. And so that was a journey of 3 years. It was incredible. It became very, very popular. But for a number of reasons, especially COVID, I had to close it. And that's the story of the Modest.
Yeah. So I think it's important to kind of understand where you were at the time you closed it, because it's important. I guess it's an important pivot for why you started F Force.
Yeah.
So can you walk me through how you were feeling in that moment where you had to wind down something that effectively maybe was your baby that you'd grown, that had kickstarted your entrepreneurial journey? How were you feeling? Were you feeling relieved? Was it the right time for you? Were you unsure? Was it difficult? Can you talk to me about that, and then how F Force was born out of this? Because before I hand back to you, I think it's always difficult in these challenging moments or moments of pivot. We can't see why this is happening in our life. But in your story, we now know that had that not happened, maybe you wouldn't have started F Force, right? So I love just reflecting and kind of diving into it with you.
Completely. Erika, I always describe it with this analogy. I always say that I had gone through, 2019 was such a challenging year in so many ways, in my life personally, but also at work. And the complications around the business had started. Every entrepreneur will tell you that there is a journey of ups and downs. And even when things are going the way you want them to go, it's super challenging. But for probably 6 months before we closed the business, it was quite challenging. And the last period before that was on another level of, just mentally, physically. At that point, I was doing this for 4 years, round the clock, completely focused on work and completely neglecting everything else. And I fought for it. I knew when it had to close that's it. I've done everything that I could do, and now it's okay. And the analogy I say is, when you know that someone is fighting an illness for a very, very long time, at one point, you feel that maybe it's okay that they go. And that's literally how I felt, that it's fine. I've done everything. Now I need to breathe a little bit. It was extremely hard for so many reasons, because I did it the wrong way. But I did it also how most entrepreneurs do it, which is you dive in and you literally neglect everything else. And that becomes everything that you do. It became my identity. So when I shot The Modest, one of the things that I struggled with is, who am I now? Like, who am I? Everybody has been celebrating this incredible platform, and it was me. So yeah, that started actually a journey of, understanding myself better, healing, really taking the time to think how I want my life to become after that experience.
Yeah. I'm really grateful that you've shared this, because I think a lot of us fall into this trap where we define our whole existence based off what we do.
Yeah.
And it's that classic thing when you meet someone, it's like, what do you do? But that's really not who they are.
Yeah.
I remember I met, I can't remember where I was somewhere social, and this guy was introducing me, my husband, to another guy, and he said, this is Jack. He loves surfing. He lives in Dubai half the year, and he's got a dog, or something like that. And I just paused for a moment, and I was like, that's so nice. Like, you've actually introduced me to who this person is, not defining them by what they do. And I know it's a tricky one, because socially, there's a lot of value in what we do, and we ourselves put a lot of who we are into what we do.
Yeah.
But I think your story is a very shared experience. And one of the reasons why I started this podcast, and why I really wanted balance to be at the core of a lot of the conversations I have, is because I think we have this idea that if we want to be successful, if we want to have the most successful business, or we want to have a really booming career, we have to do only that. But the more I've gone on, and I suppose it's possibly like a lived experience, because I've been through burnout as well, you understand that, okay, if I have time for my health, if I have time for my relationships, that actually makes me a better version of me to run my business, to be in my career and evolve and grow there. So now you've got F Force, and this is like your new business baby. It's a very different energy from what I've gathered from what we've spoken about. It's a very different energy, and the lifestyle you've been able to create around the two, if we do a direct compare, is completely different. I want to ask you, have you ever felt like you were in competition with your past self in this new business because of the different ways you looked at your role in each of the business, and maybe how society viewed you as well as involved in each of those businesses?
Yeah. So I think there's two things there. I think one is that I always am in competition with myself, comparing myself to myself. I think it's the best, the best thing to do when you're a competitive person is to always, you're comparing like for like, right? So, always evolving from where you were, because it can be dangerous to look at other people. You don't know what their circumstances are. You may think they're successful. They may be the least fulfilled person you come across. So it's so important, to be in competition with yourself. But where it played out a little bit is around the fact that I had a very different setup than what I have right now. F-Force is, smaller. It's designed to give me freedom, to allow me to be, to allow me to live my life, to allow me to actually be fulfilled, right? So by design, I have a smaller team. I work in a different way. It's very different. Now, mind you, I make more money than I made during The Modest and my corporate days. I'm much more fulfilled, and I contribute more. Without sounding pompous, but I'm trying to make a point. I actually see transformation in women on a regular basis because of the work that I do. And yet there was a period of time where, because I'm so used to that setup of the big team and, the big setup, and even The Modest. The Modest had over 100 employees, and I had an office and a warehouse and this and that. So, the whole facade of it. And there was this thing of, no, but you're an achiever, you should do something like that. It was this debate and kind of, in my mind. And at one point it just hit me that it's ego. It's complete ego. And it was my husband, because I was nagging about it, and he's like, but isn't that what made you unhappy? all that responsibility, all that, that thing that's sucking you in without any time for you to breathe. And it really hit me that it was ego. It was, it's what gets validated by people, and because at every other level, this is incomparable in terms of return on the time that is spent there. So this was one point that I had to overcome, and it took a little bit of time.
It's really interesting because you almost have to go on this internal investigation to work out, is this something I value, or am I attached to it because I've grown up seeing that this is what is valued in society? And it's a really hard one. I feel like I feel quite similarly, I went to law school and became a lawyer, which from where I come from is one of the most prestigious things you can do. And I feel sometimes, having walked away from that or redefined what that looks like in my life, I do sometimes feel that ego play.
Yeah.
Another time I can feel that come up is in the gym, right? If I'm lifting weights one week and then the week later I can't go as heavy because it's that time of the month or anything like that, I feel myself playing into that ego of what I should be doing, what I know I'm capable of. So it's just interesting to talk about, right? Because I think when you use those moments when they come up and apply a bit of curiosity, you can really learn something about yourself and question like the set ways you view things.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of honesty, to get there, because your mind will actually take you towards the direction of, but I'm an achiever, but I'm this and that. But the reality is that, when you think about, when you're really, really honest, you get to the bottom of it. And I think it gets fueled by society. I'm fortunate enough in that in my work right now, it still feels, people still validate it. So I feel good about the fact that, I get the coverage, or I get the glam, that kind of, but I can understand how other people can be driven to doing things that don't fulfill them just for the sake of getting that validation.
Yeah. There's this phenomenon called the curse of the high achiever. And it's where high performers basically set really, really high, sometimes unrealistic, but high standards for themselves. And they keep doing that over and over because it's never enough. Take Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer. He was really struggling with depression and feelings of inadequacy whilst having 28 Olympic medals. Yeah. So what advice do you have for high performers who feel like they're not living up to their own expectations?
Yeah. So this is the interesting thing, is that this is the paradox of high performers, is that it's that not feeling that anything is good enough that fuels them. That's what makes them
the double-edged sword.
Achievers. Exactly. So you almost can't take that away from them without changing them completely. However, I think that it's so important to exercise self-compassion. And I think that is so underrated, and people they just don't do it enough. I'll tell you a short story about something that happened this morning. I was talking to this wonderful lady, has, I think 3 children. She relocated from Sudan with her family because of the war 6 months ago and moved to Dubai, and had to start everything from zero, left her property, her belongings, everything, and just moved to Dubai. Even her career, she was in a particular field doing really well, had to do anything to support basically the household. And she was talking to me about her career today, and she was complaining about how unhappy she is about the fact that she's not learning fast enough, she's not doing well enough, she doesn't feel as confident. And it was a series of things she wasn't happy with. And I made her stop. And I said, you realize that you have gone through an event that most people can't move on from. Like, you've left everything behind. So a little self-compassion is so necessary. Like, we need to basically, tap ourselves on the back a little bit and just, measure progress and celebrate a little bit.
Yeah, I love that you've brought this up, and I'd actually love to ask you how you practically do that. I'll quickly share, my husband's actually been pivotal in helping me really embrace this. So at the start of the year, our YouTube channel really started growing, and I have my certain goals with subscribers and downloads and whatnot. But he said to me, great, that's your goal. Let's break that down into like 5 milestones. And every time you hit that, let's pick a way we're going to celebrate. So, 25K was something, 50K was something, 75K, etc. And that's been such a nice way for me to, and this for me has been good because I haven't had to downplay or take away from my ambition and my big goals, but it's helped me be more present in the journey.
Yeah.
Otherwise I can really fall into this trap where I'm so laser focused that it's almost like everything else is irrelevant. And then by the time you get there, you just set another goal. And it's a really dangerous trap because then you fall into that nothing's ever enough and you don't have that self-compassion.
Completely.
So how do you kind of practice that with your own goals or your own achievements?
Yeah, so a number of ways. One way is that I'm so meticulous about the goals. I mean, it's something that I look at every morning. And
Amazing.
so, yeah, it's, and we do it. It's, again, my husband and I, just like yourself, we've got goals across different areas of our lives. And so every morning I look at it, sometimes for inspiration and sometimes to actually, see what I'm doing. And actually when I do something, because it's not just the goal, it's everything else you do to get to the goal. I highlight it in a color and I write win. I literally write win in caps, but also gratitude. I practice gratitude every morning, and I actually stop at those small wins that I write down or that I see in my goal setting or in my goal document. I do a lot of gratitude. I remember in the Modus Day, I'll tell you a story. I used to have one of my closest friends used to head PR and marketing, and I remember I was getting ready for a board meeting. I was in Paris, and she called me. It was night, and she said, "You won't believe what happened. You were selected to be part of the Business of Fashion 500, which is the most influential people in the fashion industry." And literally, it took me like a second, and I'm like, thanks, babe. I really need to finish this thing. And she literally just went nuts. She flipped. And she's like, you realize at some point something has to mean something to you. And the truth is that I was so, sucked into just a doing that even big achievements I wouldn't stop to celebrate.
That's interesting. I think maybe there'd be some people listening that feel that, I don't know if disassociation is the right word, but it's almost a disconnection from the reality of what you're achieving. Any like quick tips for people who are finding gratitude a little bit difficult in the moment, or it's not a habit yet? Like, do you have some really simple ways that you practice it?
Yeah. The thing about gratitude that I realized, Erika, is that you just have to do it, and then it makes you feel better. When things are great, it's very easy to be grateful. But we all go through days when it's dark and it's not okay and you're not feeling great. But the minute you start listing things that you're grateful for, just do it for a minute and you'll see what happens. It's incredible because you're bound to feel good and to start feeling positive when you start realizing how much goodness we have around us, even when we are in, dark and difficult times. So just practice it. Just start.
It's one of those things where when you start looking for it, you see it, right? It's like that. If someone points out a new model of a car and you've never seen it before, then all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere. It's the same kind of thing. I like sometimes when I remember, I'm not the most meticulous with it. Admittedly, I really want to turn it up. So this has been a good reminder for me. But sometimes when I go to bed, I try and think of 3 things I'm grateful for, but not the big things like my husband, my house, my work, like really specific to that day. And that helps me and forces me to anchor more in the moment the next day, because I know, I'm going to have to call myself out on things in that afternoon. I'll
tell you something too that you might want to practice. So my husband and I do 3 things I'm grateful for you. On a regular basis.
That's
and
nice.
They need to be new things and different things. And sometimes they're small things, but it's also such a beautiful exercise for couples.
That's really nice.
Or in relationships, whether it's family or whatever. 3 things I'm grateful for in you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You've done this, you are this, you made me feel this way, whatever it is.
Love that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So we've gone on the journey of you being in corporate, having the Modus, and then shifting gears completely and now almost creating, I guess, a life and a business on your own terms. What are the biggest things you've had to unlearn through this process of growth?
Oh God, so many things, Erika. I spent a few years doing a lot of healing and unlearning, and it's been the best work I've ever done on myself. But I think if I were to think of one thing, it's the need to constantly do.
Wow, that's a powerful one.
It's, try and ask anybody to sit without doing anything, and you'll see how difficult people find it. To just sit still, to sit with your thoughts, to sit without, getting restless. Most people are in this space, most of us, I'm not going to exclude myself, but I do have the awareness, and I think that that's a very important thing. I think a lot of people, most people tie their worth to how much they do and what they do. So being busy is worn as a badge of honor. Constantly doing and constantly being busy and constantly working around the clock is, it's not a flex, as they say, it's not. And so that has been one of the biggest things for me to learn and to unlearn, right? And it's not been easy. So, and I think very, very linked to that is validation, because everybody wants to be validated.
Like external validation?
Yeah, external validation, whether it's the rewards, whether it is the people around you, whatever that may be, society. But I think it's a bit of a pandemic, I would say.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we just simply look at something that every single one of us do, which is consume content, just the speed at which we do that puts us in a constant state of distraction, because especially now with the second short form content came on, I think we just went to another level. Like I look at the difference now with when I was studying for school, which was 10, 15 years ago. I used to be able to sit and read for hours, and not be distracted by my phone.
Yeah.
Whereas now I notice even when I'm working, like sometimes I can't even put my phone down the other way. Like I actually notice that habit within myself. And that's why practices like meditation are so important more now than ever. It's just that being okay with just not doing anything and just observing. I think one of the things I try and remind myself a lot is I'm actually just having a human experience. Like if you actually just pause and you're like, I'm just here experiencing this and all the things that come with it, the touch, the sight, the feelings, that's quite a powerful way to just anchor into the moment and take you out of that autopilot. But I want to just quickly go back to what you were talking about this, I guess, relates to this overachievement, right? Like always being busy, always having to do stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder if you experience this as well. I find sometimes in whether it was when I had a corporate job or now that I'm kind of doing my own blended career, I find there are periods where it feels like there's like a bar on my email and like no one's responding to me, no one's getting back to me for like a whole week straight. And then it's like everything happens all at the same time and it really just feels like this season of like busy and then nothing. And sometimes I really have to remind myself like this is just a nothing week, like I'm being barred from the universe type week, because this is a gift of time to just be patient, because I can get so like frustrated and be like, where is everyone? Like, where's all the energy? Where's the communication? Do you find you have that ebb and flow in your own business?
I do. I'm forcing also a little bit of that. I'm actually forcing less of that. I'm forcing a bit of harmony so that there isn't too much of, up and down. But just back to one of the things I wanted to mention is the challenge with constantly doing is that you get to a point where you realize in one of a few ways that are not, they're not the best. You either burn out, or you experience a loss of the business, a loss of whatever it is, and you realize that all your time has gone into that, or, and this is an exercise that I do, you become old, and you realize very late in life that you actually, everything that you did was not worth it, and that you missed the most important moments, and, spending your time where it's, where it should have been spent, exploring the world or having beautiful experiences or being with your kids and so on. And so one of the things I do is actually I imagine myself 80. And I look back and I think, I do this sometimes even with decisions, big decisions, is would I regret this? Like, would it make sense if I'm at that age? Because when you're 80, you're probably fearless. Like you're done at that point. There's confidence and fearless. So yeah, I think about that a lot.
I think that's a good exercise, and it's a good segue to the next thing I was going to ask you, which is how do you overcome that initial fear of trying something new?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you've experienced that both going into entrepreneurship and then starting a new business, ending one, starting a new one. But even just in life in general, sometimes it can be as simple as we want to start going to the new gym, or we want to make a new friend, or dating, any vertical in life, there is this fear that comes with trying something new.
Yeah.
And I think the high performers that are listening to this episode that are really resonating with what we're saying, one thing we also struggle with is being a beginner again, right? And it's something that I think adds to that feeling of fear. So you've obviously just shared that really powerful exercise of yourself in 80 years' time, looking back. What other things have helped you move through that fear so it doesn't hold you back and keep you small?
Honestly, Erika, there is no secret. You just do it while scared. Honestly, I've done a 3-day confidence challenge in June for free. I had probably 3,000 women attend. And a big chunk of it was about the fact that people who do things are just courageous. They're not fearless. Being fearless actually is dangerous. I think that fear has such a bad rep, as we say. It's a fuel, right? When you do it so many times, it becomes just an indication as opposed to something that paralyzes you. And I know it sounds a little bit idealistic, but it's the truth. I'm still, until today, I've done so many things in my life that were scary, from speaking on stage to doing my first and second and fifth podcast to so much, starting my business. But I think that it's all about, and I still find things very scary today. Going out on Instagram and doing something that's off the norm. I am scared that, people are going to look at me and think, what is she thinking? A small example. But I think that, the difference is that those who do it just understand that on the other side of fear is actually what they're looking for.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
Yeah, I have to 100% agree. I think a lot of people think there's people who have fear and people who don't, but the reality is both of these people have fear. There's just a group that take action in spite of it. And it's so counterintuitive, but just by taking the action, the fear starts to dissipate. And I love that you brought up the fact that we I guess put a lot of shame on fear sometimes, because really when you think about it, fear is a neurological emotion that's there to protect us, right? And generally that comes when we're feeling unsafe. Correct. Which if we translate, that's what we're talking about. It's being out of your comfort zone. Yeah. And so now the way I've reframed it, and I think for anybody listening, you kind of have to go through it. You really have to push yourself to just do the thing, and then you'll experience that it goes away. But the reality is, every time you push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're going to feel unsafe, which is going to trigger the fear, because that's what the brain does. Completely. And so now I know every time I'm leveling up, because I start feeling that fear again. And I've almost reframed. So now I'm not like scared of it, and it doesn't keep me small or hold me back. It's actually a positive sign that I'm like really trying to push myself. And that doesn't mean it feels any nicer. Like it
Completely,
still sucks.
yeah.
It's still, you still get nervous, you still get anxious, all of those things. But I start to recognize it as, okay, I'm like pushing myself now. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I think reframing it is a key part of not letting it hold you back.
Yeah. And it's an interesting loop, because the more you do it, the more confident you become. It's one of those things where it is a muscle, and it doesn't mean, again, as you said, it doesn't mean you feel fearless when you're starting something in a completely new territory. It just means that, you've done it so many ways that it's fine. I won't die. Just like ground yourself. It's fine. I'll survive this.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk a bit about stress. So obviously there's fear and anxiety that comes with a natural evolution of pushing yourself. One thing I think is also universal is the feeling of stress. Yeah. How do you manage stress on particularly tough days or tough seasons in your life, both professionally and personally?
Yeah, so honestly for me, it's my morning routine. There is just no two-way around it. It's my non-negotiable. I've learned it through entrepreneurship, because I think it's one of those things that really kind of, makes you create a toolbox and do whatever it takes for you to start to stay sane. But my morning routine is a must. Maybe on the weekends I don't do it, but I have a regimen. I go through it, and once that's done, I feel grounded. I meditate. It's not long. It's 10 minutes, but I do that.
Do you do guided or unguided? What's your preferred?
I do guided, but an audio, and it's got breath work, it's got gratitude, and it's got visualization.
Beautiful.
It's got that. And then sometimes I journal, sometimes not. I work out. And I do my goals, right? And as I said, sometimes it's, I really dig into those goals, and sometimes I'm just inspired. I look at my vision board. And then I have like the diluted version and the perfect version of a morning routine, and it all depends on how you feel. But there are certain things that I know if I don't do, then I'm likely to be kind of, pulled in different directions. Certain things, and my morning routine really grounds me.
Yeah, we were speaking about this the other day when I was sharing with you, I guess, the concept of the balance theory, and the initial starting point is working out your non-negotiables, which basically are, if you didn't have those things in that area of your life, you would feel your energy or your sense of groundedness kind of go.
Yeah.
So for you then, do you feel you don't really come across stress because your non-negotiables are clear and you prioritize them, or is it the case you still maybe experience stress?
Of course I do.
You have, okay, so
I do, and I flip sometimes.
Why did the morning routine work?
Of course. I mean, I think that when we talk about these things, the reality is that, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We go through moments of, we lose it and we cry and we lose control, and life is not perfect. But for the most part, you do the things and you reap the rewards.
Yes.
These are not things that are random. Some people talk about, it's a morning routine. No, actually, it's something scientifically and spiritually and emotionally, however you look at it, that actually works. And so, but it doesn't mean that it makes life perfect, or that, you don't go through the experiences. Those happen all the time. But it just means that, you've got more regulation, with your emotions, you manage things better. You're less volatile.
Yeah, the way I look at it is these habits or that routine gives you a really steady baseline.
Yeah.
So rather than the baseline being down here, it's up here, so you can actually handle more from an emotional point of view. But let's just say you have a day and you're feeling more stressed than not. Is it a case that you add more things in, you take more things out? What's your go-to? What's in your toolkit for days like that?
Oh, toolkit. I like that.
Well, because it's kind of like no 2 days the same, no two stresses are the same.
And I use that, use the toolkit. I think, there honestly, everything and anything, there is meditation, like just stop. Sometimes it's playing really good uplifting music, sometimes it's listening to something motivational or something that's, calming, or getting something online that is, that will help me calm down. Sometimes I even sit myself down and talk to myself, like, Ghizlan, that's enough. You've been sulking. You've been in this for a while. Get out of it. So, whatever works really. But I also think that it's important for us to feel the feelings and to go through the stress and to lose it sometimes. Like, otherwise we're not human beings. We're not having a normal, experience. So that's normal. Even feeling negative and feeling down. I mean, people talk to me about being positive a lot, but the reality is that, yes, positive for the most part, but I do have days when I wake up and I'm not feeling positive, and I let myself, as long as it doesn't drag. You see, at one point I need to get out of it. No,
I love that. I think there's that self-compassion piece. If we bring it back to what you were saying before, in these moments, you can feel frustrating, like you want to quickly zoom over that part and just wait for it to be over, but there is a value in sitting with it. It helps you be more patient and exercise that muscle too.
Totally.
I have one more question before we go, and I'd be curious to hear if this resonates with you. So there was a survey by HSBC that found that 80% of entrepreneurs redefine their goals and sense of success every 3 to 5 years. Now, because you've had a career that's expanded over multiple different iterations of both you and your whys, I wonder if you could share the why you had, let's just say, when you were doing the modest, and the why you have now, and how that might look different?
It's so interesting that you asked me this question, because when you were talking about, I was talking about the modest, I think, and you said because you had your why. This is a very interesting thing. At that point in time, I thought my why was actually, to basically find a solution for modest dressing and to serve that purpose. But actually my why was more around contribution to women, which has been a theme. It's been a theme in the modest. It's been a theme in Queen Mode, which was the business afterwards, and it's now F-Force. And that's because, and this is when I started understanding myself more, contribution is one of my highest values. So if it's one of the things I could do for free is mentor. Like you could, not pay me, and I would still sit and try to support and mentor, and I've got a teacher in me. And I think that is my why. And this is why with F-Force, although parts of it, of course, feel like work, the majority of it doesn't. And when I sit with my class of women, normally the session is an hour, and I land up sitting for 2.5 hours sometimes with them.
Yeah.
So I think the why is more linked to contribution and actually wanting to give them tools, whether those are, practical tools they use at work or just mindset shifts that enables them to see how much potential they have. Because I know that as a 17-year-old Ghizlan and a 20-year-old Ghizlan, if I did not have that person, who looked at me and thought, there's potential there, let's give her a chance, I could have been still doing that job. And I know that because I didn't see it in myself. So for me, it gives me so much fulfillment, and it's like closing a loop to actually be able to give that to someone.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think what you've said, like there's obviously a clear value you have of contribution. And I think for anyone listening who hasn't sat down to think about what their values are, it's a really important exercise, because I think they can change, but they generally stay quite consistent over time, because they're things that you inherently care about. And then I think the way you express that or find your values in life can look very different. Now, whether that means your why shifts, I think it just has different expressions, right? And I think I just really liked the concept in that study that it changes every 3 to 5 years, because you're like me and like most people listening to this podcast, and that is they're on a path of self-improvement and self-growth, which means you're not going to be the same in 12 months
100%.
time. You wouldn't want to be anyway, right?
Correct.
And so sometimes I feel the goals I set for myself a year ago don't really fit where I'm at now. And so that constant checking in and making sure you're not falling into the status quo and those things are growing with you are equally as important.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I mean, what success looked like 3 years ago looks completely different now.
Yeah.
So completely.
I think we might have to do a part 2, because I think you and I could just chat all day long.
In a couple of years when we're very different people.
Yeah, or maybe 12 months, and maybe it doesn't have to be 3 to 5 years.
True.
But I do want to say you're a massive inspiration.
Thank you so much.
Not only for what you've actually achieved through business and creating your own life, but I just think the woman you are and the values you have and the way you just give so genuinely, I think it's something that's very easy to connect with for me personally. And I really, really appreciate your time today on the show. And for anyone wanting to connect with you and follow along your journey, where's the best place? I'll pop some links in the show notes.
Instagram. My Instagram account is where I'm most active.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you, Erika.
And I'm sure this won't be the last time you're on the show.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.